Welcome to Women's Stories, a platform where women get to tell their own stories in career, education, fashion, family life, politics, and a variety of other topics. Women are underrepresented in politics and leadership roles in Nigeria. Currently, there are only 4 female senators in the Nigerian Senate out of 109. In the House of Representatives, there are 17 female members out of 360 members. Only 8 are women out of 45 ministers in the current administration of President Bola Tinubu. These figures demonstrate that Nigeria is not prepared to accept women in leadership roles. Ahead of the 2027 general elections, what can be done to ensure more women representation? To have the conversation with me is Adora Onyechere Sydney Jack, who is a politician, author, gender advocate, ED, GSAI, and a broadcast journalist. Welcome to Women's Stories.
Thank you so much. It's good to have you.
Adora, we know that you contested for election in 2019, and I'm very sure you have a whole lot of stories to tell us. Go ahead.
Well, thank you for having me on your program. First, I think I would start from party participation. Before I went on to run for elections, I moved back to Imo State, Okigwe to be precise, because this is where my constituent is. And I was eager to be of service and come forward to run for State House of Assembly under Okigwe constituency. And prior to that, I had already started, political party shopping, making some consultancy, and engaging, high-level stakeholders within the political space who are women and gatekeepers. And one of the things we saw first was the fact that women didn't quite have a lot of chances in the big parties. And of course, at that time in 2019, all the big parties and the opposition party had a lot of, system that encouraged or were very prominent with patriarchy. So from the party executives to aspirant nomination, it was basically very masculinized, and it wasn't going to be easy to run under such a party. However, for me, it was not just running under a party. I was also very particular about the party ideal and the party constitution. And whilst that was being done, I also was looking at a regional party that had some level of localized structure at that level. Action Alliance was the party that I ran under. And before I went in to run for election under the party, I also had conversations with the party executives, the chairman, and I asked of how I could be of service within the party and how I could contribute my quota as a member of the party. And coming from the media, one of the things I was very privy to was amplifying the voices of women within the party and also amplifying conversations around our party constitution at the time, because our quota was 50% for women. And because of the toga and the slogan for the party, which means let the masses leave. And when you think about masses, it's about men and women. And so I focused on bringing messaging to the context of the party, narrative and what it signified. And so I went back to Imo State and started to popularize the party, started to educate the young people, the women. And when I had seen that there was, some level of popularity being garnered, I went ahead to enlist and mobilize women to join the party.
Which is key.
Yes. And so from the first time I went home a year and 8 months before the election. So by the time it was time for election, over 3,000 women had joined the party.
Wow.
Had carried members. But it wasn't that easy, but it was easier because I come from a political family background. My mom is a politician. She was also a 2-time commissioner for women affairs in the state. My father is whom I consider a political kingmaker.
Wow.
My mother's mentor in politics.
So it wasn't new.
Yes, it wasn't new in the terrain. But it was it bred an anxiety, because for me, I'm coming from the corporate space, the media. It wasn't as usual as somebody who was, coming into the space as someone who's regular in politics. So they were a bit worried. They worried that I may be too soft. I may be too learned.
That's it.
To be in the space. And it may be difficult for me to wade my way in, especially at that local level of politics with the men. However, I had a bit of convincing done when I made the move and moved back. And so my parents, my uncles were quite, they affirmed their position on, coming all out to support me. And so with their gatekeeping, with their chaperoning, with their mentorship, I was able to, from door to door, get to know the people.
So you enjoyed family support.
Yes. And, I think one of the critical things were that I also was able to know the conditionalities around representation. And so whilst I was in the media, the conversations were always between the leadership, not necessarily the led. And so coming into the constituency and getting in touch with the people, I realized that there was a gap between the demands of those of the constituency and the leaders who are representing them. And it helped me to look at policy restructuring. How do we prioritize the people's needs by getting them on the table and getting them in the room, which is often missing, in real-time representation. And so I started to gather facts, data, engage women, young people. What are really the key problems? There were a lot of out-of-school girls as well. There was a heightened level of prostitution at the time. So there were levels of layers of things that were beyond what I just saw that I thought I could come, because I was focused on, one, how do we look at quality education for the girl child? How do we look at, skills and upskilling skills and entrepreneurship for the young people? And also looking at enabling the functionality of state-owned media, because I felt that was at the barest minimum. And so all of that were some of the factors that I had considered that would be my first, walk in. But when I came back home, it was more devastating than I thought. And when elections came, apparently during the time of election, post or before the election main, we were perhaps maybe like the fourth party or the third party. But accidentally something happened. Along the line, the candidate or the supposed candidate of the APC was the son-in-law then of the incumbent governor of Imo State.
That was Rochas Okocha.
Yes. And, our party was, Action Alliance was not second, was not third, because you had to look at APC first, and then you look at PDP before you look at any other party. In fact, you would have to look at ABGA first. However, because of the nature of the politics and the conditionalities around the emergence of candidates, it happened that the aspiration of the son-in-law of the governor then was dependent on finding a new party to be able to shoulder his aspiration.
Remember the story then?
Yes. And so what happened was that he now had to come to the party, Action Alliance,
okay,
and made it a perfect alliance. And so from all the members of the APC within the state assembly member now moved to our party.
So the structure was changed completely.
Structure now became Action Alliance for the whole state, at the state assembly level, at the executive level. And so it was now a contest between the Action Alliance plus the APC, and of course with opposition. And so it changed the dynamics. It grew the popularity of the party. It encouraged new membership. And of course, it magnified the money politics.
So your party became a bigger platform.
Absolutely. And so when he came on, the campaign, of course, changed its nomenclature. It became bigger. It became magnified. And again, the candidate that was also the deputy governor, to the governorship candidate then was also from Okigwe zone, where I come from. So, however, there was an intriguing thing that happened. It was all a male affair. There's a lot of boys' club in it. Just maybe a few or two or three women.
Oh, okay.
However, my constituency was going to be under negotiation, because when they came on board, I mean, clearly we told them that Okigwe is not negotiable. We were here when you came, and we are actually also playing fair by allowing you to come on board, but we will not remove the women or the woman or the young people who had actually been here before, you know, the entry.
Who have invested their time
Absolutely.
and resources.
Absolutely, of the new entrants. And so coming on board, it was dynamic because my uncle came on board with them and was also looking to run for Kigo constituency.
Oh my goodness.
It was very dynamic for me, because at a point I was thinking it to say, oh, he'd been in politics longer than I was, and you know, all of that.
So was the family now saying you should step down for your uncle, or where did the alliance rely?
It was all a choice for me to make.
Okay.
And not just for me, but for the party. The party had seen the strength in how I have, you know, enabled visibility, engaging across board for the party. And so they were adamant that I would, and I have to run to full circle.
Okay.
And so we went into the ring, and that is the contest. Unfortunately, I didn't step down, even though there were a lot of, you know, negotiations, a lot of, you know, pressure from here and there. People came, friends came from within the family. It was tough.
Begging you to step down for him.
Yes. However, I had to say to myself, I could not have left my job, moved back to the East, engaged in all of the structuring, only to come to this point to not just to step down, but to concede to the conversation that I have been privy to while in broadcast and while on air, that women have to step down because of pressure, and reduce the ability for younger girls to believe that politics is also an inclusive platform.
True.
And so when I went in to run, I mean, he went on to run in Democratic Alliance, another party, but there was a lot of, you know, intrigues within the party where there were division within supporting lines, one for me, one for him, you know, all of the intrigues, and even both from, you know, the internal party family workings and from the government of the day, because he had also been part of the consistent, you know, figures in the politics of the state. And so they would have preferred that, you know, he would have gone forward, you know, perhaps not me, because, you know, he would have paid his dues and all that. But for me, it wasn't about personality. It was about context. It was about service. It was about what can women do differently. And I can tell you, just by coming out to show interest, a lot of young girls started to emerge, to want to run for councillorship, to want to do things differently, to want to ask, how can we get involved in politics without violence, you know, and acrimony and all of that engagement. And so that was the first step. And
what happened during the election?
Well, during the election, and I think pre to the election, I mean, there were a lot of course, there were. I mean, you wouldn't have not said that you would run an election without experiencing any form of betrayal, any, you know, maneuvering, manipulation, sometimes internally, family. You know, and it can be quite heartbreaking. However, before I went into contest, I was adamant that this was a race to the finish, and that regardless of what the odds presented, I was going with God, and that in knowing that, my foundation was, you know, previewed on the fact that if I go with God, it means that there is nothing that can fail, and the worst that can happen is that I get to the ballot and may not emerge. But I had that, you know, demeanor that it wasn't just for me, but it was for the generation of unborn girls and young girls in my community who have been seeing me on TV and thinking, oh, this is impossible. And having watched me come into the community and take that stand. And so, yes, pre-election, people left my team, negotiated at night, you know, came for meeting in the mornings. You know, people I thought that were in my electioneering team, you know,
left you.
Absolutely, you know, and three things played. 1, gender. 2, finance. 3, minority. So for them, a lot of them, how can we, without sounding immodest, let me say it in Igbo and I'll explain. It's meaning that how can a woman who stops to urinate be the one to come and lead me?
Wow.
So you can see the deep context of the
culture in play.
Absolutely. And then you also saw finance at play, where I planned my election like I was planning for a vacation. And so you had, cost analysis. This one would take 30,000. This one would take 5,000. You break it down and say, okay, altogether I may need this amount of millions. And so I went into the election with a budget. No matter how much you plan, it is good to plan, but it's also good to have the unplanned plan. Because when you get into politics, the unseen monies to be spent are quite higher
than what you already have planned.
So that financing is so important. And that's why I said there is nobody that can go into politics alone on his own. You must have support systems. You must have built some level of pedigree that is now able to build currency around yourself or around your capacity to be able to get believability for people to invest, because it's an investment.
True.
And you must be able to get people who are investing for you to serve, and not just for you to go there and be a portal for their benefit alone. I mean, it's good to benefit, but what is the long picture, of that?
Now, we know that funding, it's one of the biggest challenges or barriers for women to participate in politics. But what are those key things, aside funding, that is really, really pushing women behind when it comes to participation in politics?
I think political party structuring is one. Women hardly, we come out in our numbers to contest, and we take forms. Sometimes the forms are given for free. Sometimes it's 50% discount, if I can use the word. But at the end of the day, what happens is that they virtually never get to primaries, because the negotiations for the party and the structure of the party is for the highest bidder. And sometimes, even if you're very popular, there would be a lot of contestation, especially if you don't have the finance to back up that popularity. So usually they would say, for the party itself, they may feel the candidate who is popular and also has a pulse. And so even if you have capacity against popularity, that would always take, shape. And so because the parties do not adhere to their political party quota system in their constitution, it is very difficult to, have punitive measures or implement. And that's why we keep saying that until we have some level of fair playing field where we can constitute a quota system that can give women a leverage to contest, we may have to continue this 360 degrees. And so the conversation around political party structuring, the conversation around women coming out, not just to want to contest, because the first contest is at the primaries. Remember, if you do not get past the primaries, you cannot be a candidate. So you may be an aspirant, but never a candidate.
So now the biggest challenge is not just women engaging in political structure or aspiring to contest for election. It is from aspiration to getting the ticket and then to getting your name on the ballot box.
Absolutely.
So this is another big challenge that women face. Now, you talked about culture, where you mentioned that your uncle said he cannot watch a woman who opens her leg to wee, to, be his own leader.
Not just him, the male ecosystem itself.
Okay.
They had that, how can this small girl... This young girl from nowhere. How can you come and just, you say you want to? Because they don't hear or see service. They see power.
That's it.
So once you're thinking about service, the other person is thinking power broken.
So it's not about competence now.
Yes.
Whether you have the capacity or not.
Absolutely.
Gender is working against you. Power is working against you. Money is working against you. So tell me how culture and society is also helping to push women behind?
Yeah, because I think that we're very traditional. I think that's the word. Culture may be a context of tradition because tradition is imbibed. It is what amplifies the ethics of culture in itself. So my tradition may not be another person's tradition, and that's why I said tradition. Tradition is also tightly woven with religion and practices. And it's very devastating because you will find out that the woman will get so far and then be told that, in the clan she comes from, a woman cannot be the first, to go forward. Or you find out that women are limited because they are not within a particular age group and have not done the dance of age. So there are several layers of tradition. And the limitation is not just that, it is now only done in the communities. It has been amplified through socialization.
True.
And so it's left the villages and come online and amplified by gatekeepers of patriarchy online who use tradition to curb, beg your pardon, interest, aspiration, and the ability to serve for women. And so what happens is that you see a woman come, the first thing they ask her is, are you married? Oh, if you're not married, if you're married, oh, did your husband give you permission? If you did not give you permission, oh, do you have children? And then if you're divorced, they say, that's how you will go and manage, services badly. So
But those
you
questions
have all of those things coming
are not asked to the male counterpart.
Absolutely.
So it's just a women thing.
Absolutely.
And they also feel that women should not be seen. Women should not be heard. Women should be behind the scene. So these are some of the things that women face while aspiring or want to be part of politics. Now, let's know how one of the challenges that has to do with policy making. How do you think the lack of women in politics and in governance, how is it affecting policy making in governance?
It's very glaring. At the moment, we have over, how many children out of school? At least 60% of them are young girls, and they are in the community centers. And we're not talking about education, we're also talking about foundational learning, which, maximizes the importance of literacy and numeracy, which is lacking. And it takes a deliberate effort by policymakers who are gender, policy literate to be able to understand the context. We have only about 3.5% in parliament, and we have only 14 women in the House of Representatives because, of course, with the passing of late Onanuga and a few people who did not meet it in court, the numbers trickled down. And so that's even a far less percentage amongst 360 mil in the House of Representatives. But that for me is not even the dilemma. I think the dilemma for me is the participation of women in politics at the state and community level. Because politics is local.
True.
Only about, say, 14 states have women in them, and you're talking about the other numbers without women. The question is, how do you now look at the policies that are developed by those states, and how do they maximize the voices of women in the community without active participation of women at the policy centers, which is the state assembly?
Because you can't take decision for women when they are not part of leadership.
Absolutely. And so it is a tragedy, and we must make sure that it is known, to be understood, that it is not just about representation at the center, it is also representation at the state level. For instance, in the Southeast, where I come from, you have no woman in Imo State, in the State Assembly.
No woman at all.
No woman at all. You have none at all in Abia State. You have only 2 in Enugu State. You have only 1 in Ebonyi. You have only 1 in Anambra. Amongst the numbers that you have, how then can you explain to me that the issues of maternal health care would be important? How then do you explain that girl-child education, skill and upscaling entrepreneurship for young people would be a priority? How then do you explain that with that number lacking in policy direction, that you would find the maximization of the population of young women in the South. You have about 20 million people in the Southeast. 10.16 of them million are women.
Okay, now let's talk about 2027 general elections, because as we can see, alliances have been formed, coalitions here and there, parties are putting their structures in place ahead of the elections. What do you think women should begin to do now to see that they become part of this 2027 election in terms of participation and in terms of appointment? And remember that now that we're looking at all of these things playing, it is better to start early. And if women don't start early, then we're going to still see the same result that we're seeing now. So what should we begin to do? So that, and again, it's so disturbing that women have the highest number of voters. 53% of women vote. Absolutely. And yet, when it comes to leadership positions, it's a big, big problem. What should women who are aspiring to be part of politics begin to do now so that this number can increase after 2027 election?
So women are doing a lot already. Women are converging, women are engaging, voices are being maximized. I think that for me, I would have a modicum of courage if we look at the systemic issues and the enabling environment that can help women to aspire. And it brings me back to representation through quota. We talk about Rwanda, Namibia, South Africa, and I keep saying, let's not go too far. I mean, Ghana is just next door. Kenya just gave us a lip when they had 7 governors emerge after adopting a quota system.
But Nigeria has never produced a female governor.
Nigeria has never produced, apart from, one who stepped in, Betty Appiah, when Peter B was, impeached as governor then. And what I would say is that I keep hearing the conversation, if we do reserve seats, if we do quota, it's tokenism. No, it's not. It's actually an emergent decision to help take us from where we are to be able to amplify national development. Reserve seats bill for women is the conversation where we are only saying that 1 seat for women in the Senate per state, including the FCT, 1 seat for women at the House of Representatives, including the FCT per state, and then 3 seats for women at the State Assembly to represent the 3 constituencies for a period of 4 election cycles, which is about 16 years. And after that, we would have seen more women come into the room. This is not a woman's bill. It's for national development. And if we have this quota system, it will apply across party lines. The 19 political parties will now be mandatorily enabled to present 1 woman per party to go to compete at the election.
Which is not too much to ask.
And so a woman will and must emerge. It is an additional seat. It is not a seat to contest with the men on their seats or with their seats. It is a seat for women only to contest amongst women. And so at the end of the day, we can now see a larger number of women emerging through that reserve seats, and then also testing the fact that numbers indeed count and present the currency of voice at the National Assembly. And I think that is what is really strategic. If we get it right through the reserve seats, then women are enabled to come out, aspire, run for primaries, and win at the primaries, and then win elections.
Thank you very much, Adaora. I really appreciate your time. Of course, I know you have a lot to say to us, especially when it comes to women in politics. Sharing your experience is indeed, inspiring. So thank you very much for being part of Women's Stories. I'm very sure that we're looking forward to more of this as time goes by. My name is Punaraman Benjamin. Thank you for staying with us. Bye. all of us.